I didn't know Khurshid Anwar. I know people who were friends of his, but like almost everybody who is present here, I was deeply saddened and shocked by the news of his passing and the way it happened, and was also jolted into thinking about or reflecting about all these issues that it raises. And I cannot say today that I have answers, even though I may have worked on media trials for a long time. But I certainly know that the questions have to be different now, because we are working in a very different situation. The older categories by which we used to hold people responsible are changing. We are right in the middle of a great deal of transformation as far as media and the entanglement of our lives are concerned. For instance, I don't think we any longer have the classical kind of separation with the press and the public. The social media has come in there where all of us participate. Perhaps I'm not the right person to talk about it because I don't even have a Facebook account. But it's very clear that now it's not just the media on one side and the public on the other. It's also people themselves who are part of the social media, who are opinion makers, who are information producers. And therefore, when I say that there needs to be a greater accountability, it actually implicates all of us. It is not just the media out there. The media, by its definition, is very different, is a very different beast at this point in time, and we need to deal with that. I have looked at one case very closely, and that was the Arushi Talwar Hemraj murder case. I've been tracking the case from the time it happened. I've been through every piece of paper, and it's incredible that here is a case where there is absolutely no evidence, no testimony, no DNA evidence, and yet the people who were accused of it by the second CBI team are now in jail. And even if you were to look at the trial court judgment, even at the face of it, you will find so many egregious errors of evidence, testimony, judicial reasoning. It was very difficult for me to even get my progressive friends interested in the Arushi Talwar case, because it wasn't a political case. It was outside a political frame. If it is not framed within a secular communal framework, people don't get it. And that is why for me that case was so political, because it was in some ways embodying the new politics that we would have to actually confront. And as a result now, a number of things are being put in that framework for making it more understandable. I do not deny the fact that Tarun Tejpal is deeply handicapped by being in Goa, which is a BJP-ruled state. But at the same time, I don't think that's the only prism through which we can see this case. And I think what this moment demands from us is a kind of a complicated look at things, because things are not simple anymore. And we have to try and understand these things in all its complexity. Now, we have been all quite, fed up of the media, as is very evident from the way everybody has spoken. And I think that, to talk about the, television being irresponsible and to say all these things is a bit like saying water is wet. Everybody, I think all of us are pretty much agreed on that now. And on the other hand, can we say that, and we have so many cases that we know ourselves where the pre-trial publicity has adversely affected the case, like in the S.A.R. Gilani case in its trial stages, the Iftikhar Gilani arrest, and the newspapers every day coming up with factual information which was parading as factual information which was completely wrong. In fact, Iftikhar Gilani has a kind of a PowerPoint presentation to show you the headlines of every possible so-called respectable newspaper that had published false information. Never ever apologized for the fact that they did that. The same thing happened in the Arushi Talwar case. Of course in the S.A.R. Gilani case as well. So, this has been happening for a very long time, and the newspaper, none of us have actually stood up and said that the newspapers must apologize. Now, as Manisha knows very well, there's an India Today cover story where these guys talking to the Butler House boys and suddenly saying, these guys have actually confessed to it. It was all rubbish. I mean, we know that. And suddenly a lot of people were saying, well, here is the evidence, so you don't have to have an investigation, you don't have to go to court, here the boys have said it. All of us, many of us who criticized that at that time, are now excited that there is this Aseem Anand story on Caravan. How do we look at it? Are we willing to confront the challenges that come up with something like that? Of course, we were all delighted to read the Aseem Anand story, but on what grounds are we going to support this and not that? This is a moment which really requires us to think. Now, if we go, to this whole business of the feminist debate, let's first realize that feminism is not some kind of a monolith. Feminists are not agreed. Why should they be? Marxists are not. It is, there are different kinds of feminisms. Feminists were one of the first people to realize that laws don't mean anything. That running after laws is not the best way to change society in the way that you would like, and that you would have to do a whole lot of other hard work, and that law seems like a kind of a remedy, but it is certainly not. And yet, I think as feminists, how did we not realize that we have a ridiculous rape law, which is into over-criminalizing, over-sentencing. So, and yet we were all involved. We were talking about gender neutrality. This doesn't have gender neutrality. We were looking at a whole range of other things and not looking at the rest, which was equally problematic. So of course the feminists have to think about it. But again, here, we should not run the risk of saying that, if you're a feminist, now go and hide because, you're not getting the picture right. I think there is a lot of sexism even now that's happening. And that sexism, I think, concerns us all. And that has not gone away. And here, I do think the media can play a role if it is played well. I'm not sure that the media should play the role. I think that we have to use the media responsibly in order for the media to play that role, is to use it as to level the playing field. Now, if there is a law intern who wants to complain against a justice, the media can give that law intern that kind of a protection by putting it out in the private domain, in the public domain. And it can be done without a voyeuristic excess that the Tarun Tejpal case demonstrated, by which the day that he was arrested, NDTV interrupted the big fight to have a live telecast of Tarun Tejpal being taken to jail. Without doing any of that, I think it is possible to do it. And I think that the whole business of us being able to use the media as a level playing field has been understood well, perhaps not by activists so much as the judiciary itself. Because on January 16, 2014, many of you might be aware that there was an ex parte order that was passed by Judge Manmohan Singh on the Swatantra Kumar case. And that, to my mind, is remarkable, because it is the gag order of the worst kind. Talking about defamation about Swatantra Kumar, now if you had this kind of an order for the Arushi Talwar case, or the S.A.R. Gilani case, or the Iftikhar Gilani case, even the Butler House case, the situation would have been entirely different. Now the judiciary has stepped in to protect one of their own. And not only, and this is like unprecedented, because usually a kind of an order of this kind would not be more than 5 to, at the most 8 pages. This is 42 pages. This is 42 pages, and it has already, and it reads like a judgment. So it tells you that Swatantra Kumar has been defamed, and the girl has indulged in gross libel and slander. And let me read one section to you, where the judgment says that the said allegations are stated to be false, scandalous, and a product of conspiracy between defendants number 5, which is the law intern, and the other influential persons who have a vested interest in destabilizing the institution of justice disposal. Now, you can see how dangerous this can get. And this particular judgment was delivered. I mean, Swatantra Kumar was represented by an army of senior advocates. So it was the most brazen and brute show of strength. And here they have actually passed a judgment, literally settled the matter over here. Instead of, it's not an order, it reads like a judgment. Now, and this, when I was reading this, it was reminding me of this completely startling article that Prem Shankar Jha in December 22nd, 2013 wrote about the Tarun Tejpal case. And it shows how, while you may have the same feelings of discomfort and reservations about the issue, your reasonings may be entirely different. Because everything that the feminists had fought for, he is saying, it's like, you know, the many obstacles to rape that that have been brought in front of the rapist. So says things like, you know, that physical resistance should not be considered in this matter. I'm sure that all of you are aware of that. That at one time, if a woman did not physically resist, it was considered that she had consented to it. So he's objecting to that being taken away. Also to say things like, you know, there should be, you know, the whole business of prescribed limit, because we all know that sometimes if you're in trauma, you cannot speak immediately. But the worst part is when he says that the new act has even blocked the defendant's last line of defense. Here the defendant is the rapist, the alleged rapist. To allege that the plaintiff was the last line of defense to allege that the plaintiff has a record of indulging in sexual innuendo or conferring sexual favors upon men, stating explicitly that the character of the victim is irrelevant. So in other words, the long fight that we had to say that the sexual reputation of the woman should not matter, he's saying, oh my God, that's a problem because we cannot defend ourselves anymore. So we have sexism amongst us. Why should we deny that? And we have to fight it. So I don't think there is anybody here, none of us can actually go away saying that we have the whole story, or I think there's something in all of us that we have to look into. Because none of these cases are straightforward, none of these cases are simple. And let us also be sure that a whole lot has also happened for law interns or somebody like the Tehelka reporter to be able to come out and speak up, and I don't think that we should forget that. And if we say that, you know, this is a case that needs to be looked into, there must be due process, it does not mean that we can't have a discussion on the Criminal Amendment Act. So I guess what I'm saying is that there is no need for us to take an either-or position over here, because the situation is far more complex, and that we have many battles to fight, and that we really need to be very reflective about all these various issues, because none of them are simple. And it's also interesting that I'm using the word reflect, because reflect means to pause and think. And where can one pause and think in today's breaking news time when, you know, if the news is not good today, it's not there tomorrow. And this again is something that should make us think about how we want to use the media. And as somebody who teaches the media, I've always said that the media by itself can be good, bad, indifferent, whatever. What we need is to be able to use the media to our advantage. And except that at the same time, we must realize that we ourselves are very much part of that kind of information production. So I think there's a lot of reflection to be done on all our parts, and it's just with that request or appeal, I will finish what I have to say. Thank you.